Because you see, the reason why I read law in the first place is because of what was happening back home. I grew up with birth, right? I went for birthday 2 onwards. And if you look at that famous photo with FRU on one side and everyone on the other side, the rain was pouring. You count 4 rows from the front. That's me. That's me, yeah. So
Well done.
right? Somewhere in that dot there. And it was events like that that stirred me up and got me really loving the country and seeing its potential and the people in it and what we can become and all the types of improvements legally, policy-wise, economic, that we really, really need. And that's why I went to the UK to read law. And that's what I was passionate about. So when they asked me, what about UK law are you passionate about? I'm thinking about the human rights that we need to improve in Malaysia. I'm thinking about constitutional amendments that we need to do. I'm thinking about the penal code, SOSMA, ISA, you know. And so I went home after those interviews and I sat in my room, I started thinking to myself, you know, I asked myself 2 very basic questions. Michelle, can you do something with the state of affairs of Malaysia back home? And the answer was yes. And so I asked myself the second question, which was, if you don't do anything about the state of affairs back home, can you forgive yourself? Right? And the answer was no.
Welcome everyone to HEARTtalk, coming to you live from Kota Kinabalu in Sabah in Malaysia. This is the second of a series which I've called Quo Vadis Malaysia, which means, where are you going, Malaysia? It's a question that I ask myself many times, and I've asked my own children the same question. Where are you going? Not to be inquisitive, but to make sure that they're going to a place that is safe and that they will return safely home. So my first guest on Quo Vadis Malaysia was Tun Dr. Mahathir, and he wrote this book. And in the last chapter, in chapter 13, page 277, the question is, Quo Vadis Malaysia. And I would like all of you, irrespective of the man, but I would love all of you, every Malaysian, to read the book so you may understand 80 years of a political journey and where the country is today. Now, my second guest is a politician, and she's just been chosen to go for a second term. So I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to bring her on because she's exciting, she's dynamic, she's vibrant, she has a vision for the country, and most important of all, she has the pulse of the nation on her heart. So join me to welcome Michelle Ng from Kuala Lumpur, Subang Jaya, let's put it that way. Welcome, Michelle.
Hi, Charles.
Hi, and welcome, and good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, my honor. And let me just start off by saying Congratulations in your nomination.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to leave the guests who are listening in on Heart Talk to know more about you and a bit of a background. You are my second guest on this series called Quo Vadis Malaysia, and it's an honor to have such an age difference between my first and my second. And your voice, what we're going to talk about today, are pertinent questions because it's about the unheard. And in life, there are so many voices that go on in a nation, but many of them are not heard. And you have been given this wonderful task of carrying a torch, like Nightingale, just to bring all those who are unheard to the forefront of a nation. Because at the end of the day, we have spent 66 years trying to survive when we should be in a mode of thriving for excellence now. So there's a big, big difference, when as a doctor, as a surgeon myself, when they have breast cancer, we talk about breast cancer survivors.
Yeah.
But when we talk about a nation like Malaysia, we are talking about thriving for excellence. But unfortunately, so many events are going on that are taking us backwards as if we are struggling to survive. And that is something that is worth talking about. So why don't we start off by just giving us an insight about yourself? I had a pre-clip just now that you're a lawyer and what happened and how that calling started. So let's just start from there.
My name is Michelle. I came back from Malaysia in 2013. Before that, I was studying in the UK. I was reading law in the London School of Economics on a Maxis scholarship. And I decided to come home to serve my country because it was very clear when I was there that this is the calling that has been put into my life and put into my heart. And today we're here for Heart Talk, right? I read law because of what was happening in Malaysia at that time. As your introductory video showed, I was a product of Bersih, where we were fighting for free and fair elections. And this was something that was so fundamental to any country's democracy. But why is it that it had to come to a stage where we had to take it to the streets and have it clamped down the way it was with fire trucks and chemical-laced waters and God knows what? I felt that at that point, the country was at its critical point, where even something so basic and fundamental, and we're seeking something so basic and fundamental, can be considered like a threat or treated like a threat, at least, to the ruling government. And surely something is wrong there. Surely something is wrong. It was also at that time where I was speaking to many people about figuring life out after school. And I realized that, look, many people were looking outwards because what's happening back home is too much and too difficult to handle. But as more people did that, deep down in my heart, I'm wondering, what about the very simple fundamentals that we are taught as children? If you have a problem, what do? I'm sure Dr. Charles, you have children. You would tell them to face it and fix it.
Right.
So I believe this, that God has a reason why he has made us Malaysians. He has a reason why he has made us Malaysians. There's a reason why he did not make you English or American or Australian. It's because, this is my calling at least, until he has called you elsewhere, it is our duty to stay and discover what he wants us to do here in our lives for us. So the calling to go elsewhere must be a clear, proactive calling. Dr. Charles, go to Kota Kinabalu, right? It should be, Michelle, stay in the UK. Don't go home to Malaysia. But my heartstrings were pulled otherwise. Every day that I was there in the UK, I was looking back at the news of what was going on back here. And I kept wondering whether in this situation I could do something, even however small it is. As a lawyer, picking up a case or following someone to court or taking someone's bag as, if they've been appointed as a big lawyer for this case to court, doing paperwork, working towards that. I felt that if I can even contribute in a small way, that I should. Because Malaysia deserves that. Because Malaysia has potential. Look around you and look at how beautiful the people are. look around you and look at the type of resources that we have. There is no reason why countries smaller than us, like Singapore, should do better when we have so much more, if well managed, that could benefit the people. And I tell you, the reality is you go to any country and all countries will have their problems, right? But I don't want to be stuck in someone else's country fixing their problems when I can be investing that very same energy coming home and making this a place where we all can feel more like home and that we belong and that we would love and want to stay for and fight for. And so that was my heart, and that's why I decided to come back home, and has since then stayed. And in 2018, I was already by then a DAP member, was called to run as the state assemblywoman in Subang Jaya. At that time, I was the youngest in the entire state assembly, which in itself is a daunting task. And I've served 5 years since as a state assemblywoman. So coming home, state assemblywoman, the jurisdiction as a state is very different from the federal government, which usually captures more attention, whether it's in the news or in people's minds, right? Because the federal government deals with big issues like nationality and security and human rights and education and health, big topics. And the state deals with equally important issues of land, of water, of forestry, and in the context of climate change, where we are going to, will play an increasingly more important role. So yes, the issues that stirred me then were the big parliament type issues. But to me, this platform is equally important, perhaps even more important as time goes by, also because of where we are placed in Selangor, which is the crown jewel of Malaysia.
All right. Well said and well felt, and well heard. Because I'm sure there are many who are in the Generation Z who would be inspired to hear what you're saying. Because like David, you can only serve one generation, and I think what your calling has been tremendous. Now, in your own words, you have written this: only Malaysians can save Malaysia, in one of your writings. So I'm going to ask you, what is it to be a Malaysian? Let's start from there, because these are core issues that always come up when certain decisions have to be made, and especially when it comes to governance and government. So as a politician, in fact, in the batch of 15 that I saw there, you were the youngest. And I thought, oh, what a remarkable point of service. And when I was going through all your Facebook and I was going through your Instagram, and I was marveling at the heart behind the service that you were doing. And there were the Linas and the Subramaniams and all those lives that you impacted. It's tremendous. And the nation should actually be able to see all those things, In fact, they should be doing that for everyone who is standing for a particular locality. But having said that, what is it to be a Malaysian as a politician today? For you?
I speak on behalf of my generation. My generation is very different from the generations before because Malaysia evolved, right? We all know our history. We have ancestors that came from India and from China. And so as generations go by, you will feel that each people identify very differently. My parents will, of course, have their grandparents who just came from China. And so their identity will be quite different from how I perceive it to be. I would say this: my generation knows no other home except Malaysia. We are a beautiful amalgamation of all cultures. And I would just use one example to exemplify it. Dr. Charles, my wedding was in a Malay kampung in Kuang. It was a Christian wedding. I'm a Christian. And our reception, which was also in that same setting, that Malay kampung, was served with an Indian lunch. Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm Chinese. But it's a celebration of who we are. And when both of us were speaking to our parents about how our wedding would be conceptually, we noticed a little bit of resistance. And that's why I say that we identify very differently. I celebrate our diversity. And that is what I want to fight for. Because the Malaysian that we should build moving forward is one where we can all come to the center and build a common identity regardless of your skin color or your background or your race or your religion. And I am confident that there are enough people in this race with me who desire for the same thing and will want to invest that time and energy in order to build that common identity for all of us across the board.
Now, that's beautifully said. And like I said, this is the voice for the next 20, 30 years that we need to brace ourselves because, Michelle, in plastic surgery, every instrument that I use today has a history that goes back into the 1900s. If I use an instrument called Gillies, it's about Harold Gillies, who was a New Zealand surgeon back in 1917 during First World War.
Wow.
What this country and what we all feel, I'm 70 now, and but I got the heart of a 23-year-old, okay? So I'm still rock and dance, but but what I'm saying is after 40 years of work and service, and I served in the military, I had army fatigues, I was a captain in the army. So I know what it is to serve the nation. But it is disheartening to many, and I hope they're all listening in, that even that very question of the identity today is being challenged. Who we are as a people in this wonderful nation. I mean, I came to Sabah in 1989, 35 years ago. I was sent here to start the first department of plastic surgery. And it was a culture shock for me because, I used to come in as a visiting surgeon, but the challenge of setting up the first department of plastic surgery here, I came in here and I thought this is a different land, different sun, different moon, different, everything was different. People were amazing, you don't have to force them to smile. They smile naturally. And, but it took me for a shock because when I landed at the airport, Sabah this side, orang bukan Sabah this side. You know what I mean? So it was that kind of a culture shock. But it's because of the heart of service that I was able to serve 40 years of surgery to a place that was not my home, right? I mean, I'm from the West. But because we are all Malaysians, that culture became integrated. And I love this celebration of diversity, which is what is worth fighting for. But we don't have to fight for it, because there's enough of wealth to be shared. Now, I want to take you to that slogan that I saw, which to me is very important. It was just above one of your presentations. It read like this: Subang Semarak Harapan. And I was asking my girls, because my BM is not very good, the only 3 words I know in BM at that time, those days when I sat for my exam, was Wala Bagaimanapun. And I learned that from the first author of my title, Kuawabadis Malaysia. But anyway, having said that, and Semarak is a beautiful word because it means resplendence. Dazzle me, Michelle, dazzle me. And as if the Subang whole locality, that whole dun, is asking you, dazzle me. Make me, glorify me, make me shine, make me bright, because that's where hope lives.
Yeah.
Hope takes residence where there is resplendence, you see. And I've said this many times in all my discussions with people and all that. Hope is a currency of the future in the present. You are now sitting with me and using that same currency, talking about hope. That is what is keeping you alive. You don't wait, you're not living in the future, but you hope for something. That's the currency. But Michelle, as a politician, there's also blind hope. And blind hope is willful ignorance of our past. And I want you to hold this to your heart and I want your thinking about it. For example, in America, we talk about post 9/11. A tragedy hit them. America is under attack. Until today, they reconcile themselves to that particular day. In this country, we have post 1969. And I always talk about this when I talk to people. You know, some of them would say, don't talk about it. You say, no, if you have a child, and as that child is growing up, everything that happens in that child's history is relevant to you as a parent.
Yeah.
So there's no such thing as what is relevant and what is irrelevant when it comes to the growth of a nation. So talk to us about hope. As you came in with ideas of trying to change this and constitution and all things in your heart and mind, and you're now grappling with the small details of sorting out problems. The whole question now is hope for the nation. I mean, how do you now prepare yourself for a second time service and keep the hope alive? What is hope to you?
Can I just say this? You would think that going into it the second time that is easier. After the announcement of on Monday that I'll be running again in Subang Jaya, I actually shed tears and I was shaking because I realized the responsibility after going through one term of how heavy and important it is. And I hold it in the highest regard. And more so, like what you said, when that responsibility is to build a future for people. And that's how, in fact, I mean, it's so timely that we're talking about this. It's how I've spoken to my team and how we want to start our campaign as well by looking forward and building and painting that dream for Malaysia. If you talk about hope to me, hope is a place for Malaysia where people around us look upon, where people around us who want to come and say that, well, Malaysia is a place where I can truly thrive. And people want to come home and contribute and call this their home. I want us to do away with conversations of, oh, Malaysia is not good enough. Oh, it's always conversations of pity. Oh, Malaysia, it's badly run. Oh, Malaysia is corrupt, right? So I want to lay that foundation. And why do I say lay that foundation, Dr. Charles? Because I'm practical and I feel that it would take time for us to reach that destiny that I painted, right? It's not going to happen overnight. Lay that foundation so that future generations can be inspired and build upon it. And they too would carry that hope and move that country forward. That hope doesn't just happen, Dr. Charles. I don't believe that. That hope is built, that hope is carried, and that hope has to be spread, right? Insofar as Selangor is concerned, I hope that the people can see year on year how we have moved on and developed that hope. And the history is this, Dr. Charles.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about hope, we must talk about progress.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you don't see progress, there is no hope.
Uh-huh.
In Selangor in 2008, we laid that foundation with institutional reform. We made the head of the PAC, Public Accounts Committee, the head of the opposition. Previously, you wouldn't have that. You would have your own backbencher heading the Accounts Committee, and there was no check and balance. We put that in place. We separated the roles of councillors and state assemblymen, so there's check and balance. We put our proceedings online so that the public can see. We made sure that we have a select committee. We made sure that people have access to those avenues so that good governance can finally take place at Selangor. And when that happened, I can send you many charts of how the economic index, whether you talk about our state reserves, whether you talk about FDI, Selangor has been on an upward trend. And you see that wealth coming back to the people because we're plugging all the leakages. Going into the third term, all the legacy problems that previously we didn't deal with had to be dealt with now. And how you see that wealth come true is, ironically, through COVID. Selangor is the only state that was able to do free screening for its people. And you remember that time as a doctor, you would know the cost of it was extremely high for its people for free.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to buy vaccines. Only two states were able to do that, Johor and Selangor, because we had that reserve and the wealth was returning to the people. Now we are going around telling people has built the foundation for the federal government to mirror. And you will see that if we are here long enough with the federal government, that hope being built as well.
Yeah.
So what we have done here is laying the foundation with the federal government. This first term, I tell you, is where we will be doing the same thing of doing institutional reforms, making sure that the structure and the bones of this country is well placed so that the muscle can finally be built on it.
Oh,
Right.
but brilliant, brilliant. I mean, you know, this is all about nation building. And I can tell you one thing, you are the light that will set this candle on fire because you have the right spirit. And I think that's very important. And that spirit needs to be shared and others to be able to follow suit. I just have a quote that I just pulled up, and that was by Nelson Mandela, who said this, may your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears. And it's very unfortunate that a lot of hope now is being peddled with fear. And you know, as I was talking just now about post 1969, I was 17 years old. And the reason why I bring it up, and many people say, in fact, I just heard this morning of someone made a statement saying that if you're not born before that time or something, keep quiet. You can't tell a child to keep quiet if that child had a problem in growing up. It is relevant to you as a parent. So even though that you are 33, you are talking about your generation, but there are many who have gone through bigger and worse times, you see. So I talk about fault lines because you are a politician. And when you talk about fault lines, geologically, that's where you find that if there are tectonic shifts, can end up with earthquakes and, you know, tsunamis and all that. So when you are seeing the small picture of Subang Jaya, but you're also smart enough as a lawyer to see the bigger picture of what is happening nationwide. And on top of that, the bigger picture of what's happening in the Asia geopolitical arena, because that's where the play is going on.
Yeah.
And so I think the whole question today that we are struggling with, especially with politicians, and I want your thoughts on it because you are the one who's going to carry the fire forward, but you cannot do it without knowing what's happened before so that the people are alert. And that is this. When there's an economic emancipation of a people and a nation, there are monsters that can come out of it. One is poverty and the other one is corruption. And as a doctor, both are diseases that can end up with gangrene and losing of limbs, actually. So I want to ask you that even in a rich state like Selangor, where all the wealth is coming back, but there are still what are called geographical fault lines, where the urban poor and the rural poor are still there, alive. Now, how are you addressing that situation? Because it is the poverty that will result in the wretchedness of all that is fearful, in case even what the little bit you have is going to be lost. So I think the smart politician is one who is available to know where the fault lines lie. And even though we may be in an urban place, but they're still urban poor. So the way I look at it is that we are in a time now, because we are very mature at 66 years, how old do you want to keep on going to feeding people to be able to think right? And what was the new economic policy those days? I mean, today is a remarkable thing in 2019, which came out, which was called the SPV, which is the Shared Prosperity Vision, which is like an MPV, a multiple purpose vehicle, you know, with shared. And so there's so much of wealth which you are talking about. And you are right in the heart of the land where volcanic eruptions happened in 1969, you see. What we do not want is even to think about it or hope it doesn't happen ever. But there are waves that are happening that may just surpass all our efforts, you see. So poverty is an issue. So how are you now in your second or third term or whatever going to address that within your rice bowl or what you have been given? Because it's real.
Dr. Charles, I think it goes back to the fundamentals of what the role of government is. All right. If you go back then when government started when the wealthy had land and tenants came in. Tenants came in and they leveraged on the wealth of that land to create wealth for themselves. And from there, the landlord would acquire taxes from their tenants. All right, and that's how the basic structure of government worked. And what that would do is he would invest it back into weaker parts, your fault lines, what you call fault lines, right, of his terrain, in order to ensure that everyone is equalized and have that opportunity to gain wealth from that land. So that is where the concept of taxes came in, right? So what is the role of taxes? The role of taxes is so that we have enough wealth within government, and the responsibility in our hands then is to allocate it so that we equalize the playing field for those who can't. So this is where your B40, those who suffer in poverty, will come in, right? And the reality is, not everyone is born into wealth, and not everyone is born into privilege, right? God meant different destinies for each of us. But as government, how do you ease that process for the poor? And that is why I say that Selangor is an example of how that can be done. We are the only state where we have 44 programs, 44, that will take care of someone from cradle to grave, right? Literally from cradle to grave. When you go to school, the state will encourage you to go to school and will provide you bags if you are poor, right? If you are well-to-do, sorry, you're on your own, all right? Bags, stationery, water bottles, so that you can go to school with dignity. You go to SPM, you talk about young people who are falling behind studies. The state government comes in and empowers the teachers to get this group of kids up, and we give them extra classes and the books that they need so they can study and so that they can do well in their exams and have a bright future. If this group of kids do well, state government comes in and say, all right, I want you to go to university, and I know that you're going to have difficulty paying that registration fee. So here's 1,000 ringgit, and you go do well. And for those who actually do well and go places, all right, and can prove that they will come back and they would love and serve the state will say, has actually done that already. I'm going to invest in that future, and I'm going to fund your education so that you can come back and do just that and serve the state. When you have your children, state comes and say, look, young person, young family, we want to make sure that your family lasts. And for those of us who have been in marriages, this is something that is not easy to handle. And it starts off as puppy love and weddings, something that's glorified now, but the hard work comes after. And young people, are you ready for that? If you are not, it's fine. The state will come around you and equip you with the basics of what are the foundations of a good marriage, right?
Okay.
Come and be counseled. So those are the things that we do, cradle to grave, and I can just go on and on about what we do.
Correct, and that's why you are positioned well to continue to build on what you have already started and all that. I read about and I saw this what's it called, camp pool or something, a van.
Yes,
And I thought, wow, that's a pretty brilliant idea. But the point is that if you talk about shared wealth, every state has got its own demographics and its own problems in C2. And so forth, that you happen to be in a state that is not poor. I mean, the whole state is got all the capital of income there. And, the problem is that, all these are brilliant ideas where we're changing of government and thoughts and policies. You find that the people who suffer the most are the people who are poor because, today they have food on the table. Tomorrow, somebody else comes and takes the food away. And I think this is a malignant problem that needs to be addressed, because if we are a shared population of prosperity, there's enough to go around, and I think that is something that needs to be worked on. But with every election, I guess if the temperatures start going up and half of the leaders are either throwing slogans or they're spending their time in court or all sorts of things, which actually can be disillusioning to people who are on the sidelines, you see. And this is so as a politician, as a young politician, when you look and see all that is happening, how does that affect your spirit of service? And this is hard talk, right? This is heart to heart conversation, because if it was me, I would like to go back and practice law, because, it's as if I would not know that all my effort is tomorrow. If I'm in the opposition, I know I'm going to get zero help. But having said that, within inverted commas, how do you keep the flame of fire of this country doing well when all these things are being bandied around in the media? And the viciousness of social media today, there are so many silos around who can sit in a coffee shop on a stool and talk. And there are people who listen, because it's entertaining. And does that worry you? I'm sure it does as a politician. I'm addressing you as a politician when you hear all this banding around.
Yeah. Dr. Charles, I'm human as well. And I feel the same way as many good Malaysians do. If it is a matter that saddens you, it saddens us as well. If it is a matter that makes you excited, so it does for us as well. We are the same human. But the difference I feel of my time in politics is because the road that was paved for me to even get here is so God ordained that I am here insofar as God wants me to. I serve God and I serve people. And if God says, Michelle, your time is up, let's move on to something else, it is only then that I would. I can tell you so many times that I felt like giving up.
Sure.
Because it's difficult and expectation is high and there's just so much bad that is going around, right? And I do feel demoralized a lot of the times when I go home. But when that happens, and this is the uniqueness and that relationship of being Christian, where you come at the feet of God every night and you surrender your today to Him and your tomorrow to Him. And you say, God, go before me and surround me and lead the way. Take over that wheel and drive this car for me. My life is yours. And insofar as you want me to walk this path, I will. It's total surrender. And with that total surrender comes all this, where you face these fears, but while it is scary, it is also a light burden to bear, because you and I know as Christians that this is God's fight, right? This burden is God's, and it is for me to surrender it to Him. So while it is heavy, it is also not. I know it doesn't make sense, but that is a life of being a Christian. It's quite paradoxical, but very exciting at the same time in discovering what God wants for me in this life, so that I can extend His kingdom and be His voice for the people and to demonstrate His heart for Malaysians, however difficult it is. And God, and that's the thing about God, right? He is there in the difficult times, and He does not promise an easy life. What He promises is that I will be there with you through it all.
Yeah.
And I take comfort in that. And that's how I've been able to survive, if you will, until today.
No, I'm telling you, and I just hope YB Anthony Look is listening, because because I promise you, he will make you drive the car. And but how has your faith played out in your time of service when they've got different races of different faith? Because I believe that when I was interviewing my first guest, it was just at this Adil Adha, which is actually a sacrificial festival. And I was sharing about how in our faith we have sacrifice, and that sacrifice was for the sins of the whole world. And in the other faith, it was a sacrifice of a life, in their prophet. So we have so many commonalities when it comes to faith, and faith can actually bring this whole country together, because it's not one against the other, but at the end of the day, we all know that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess, you see. So it's just a question of being patient. But how have you lived through that faith, like what you've been expressing, and worked within the different communities? Is that something that you would love to share with us?
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of Christian communities do ask me. And I'll be honest with you, when I first started off in this job, it was a challenge that I had to face, because prior to that, my comfort zone was in church. There was no need per se for me to go into different places of worship. Of course, I knew of them. Of course, I've looked at them from afar. But now in this role, I take on a different capacity where I would have to serve them as the people of Subang Jaya.
Right.
A lot of people would see different faiths as a point of conflict. But I like the way that you put it, Dr. Charles, which is that it can be a point of unity where we come together and find commonality. And I'll use one example. When I go into mosques during Ramadan, when they fast, I go in and break fast together with them, of course, as their elected representative, but they would notice that I wear a cross, all right? And I know that some of them feel a little bit awkward because our faiths do differ. But as we break fast, I would share with them that, hey, look, actually, as Christians, we do fast as well. And that opens up a conversation because that's commonality. And we start discussing about why we fast. Why do you as a Muslim fast? Why do I as a Christian fast? How do I fast? How do you fast? Why does it differ? And when it boils down to the person, you realize that actually I have more in common with this person than do I have differences. And that goes back to our earlier point of hope, because you start bridging that gap. You start bridging the fault lines that you have mentioned earlier by using the very thing, that very entity that you thought would have created differences. And that is the hope that my generation carries and the hope that we want to build. And I am hopeful that in these state elections, that it also would present itself as an opportunity. And with enough people on board talking about the same thing, we'll be able to do that.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's a powerful testimony of where you are at this point in time. But I think the whole country cannot run away from the fact that the single most denominator that is common in all the disparities is economic disparity with different races. And why is it there's so much of mistrust and fear that whatever they have might be lost? And I think this is something that needs to be addressed on an open scale now, because these fault lines can happen again, and tsunamis can happen again. And the biggest tsunami that's actually coming is the digital transformation. And when that digital transformation hits this country, our neighboring countries are already preparing, and they've got people all well positioned. And this is where there's a place in poverty. And even in India, for example, all the rural people are all being trained now how to think about AI and all this stuff, which they can use in agriculture. It's all being digitalized now. And that's something to look into, because we can share knowledge, you see, and recognize who are the weak ones and be big-hearted to help the weak ones prosper so that the prosperity is shared. And I think this is the direction of where we want to go. Now, it's amazing talking to you, because I could spend the whole day talking to you.
Yeah,
because it's not very often we get a politician, but because I started this series, but some questions have come in. And and it's amazing. So let me just put this to you, all right? Question from Joanne. Besides the romance of being part of previous initiatives of Burse and all that, which you mentioned, to bring down whatever crazy is all in, I call it crazy, What do you see possible for this country if there was such another rally? What would be a rallying cry? In this point in time, let's say, and elections are done, and then there's a stir up, and then again there's this. How many times can you take a broom and sweep with Bersih? Because
Yeah.
those fault lines are real, and that's why I say my first hour with you was reconciliation. There must be a national day of reconciliation.
Yeah. Actually, I mean, before you said that, the first thing that came to my mind was unity.
Right.
It must be unity. And I would say this, Dr. Charles, some people might not agree with me, but I feel that this unity government is a blessing in disguise. For far too long, we have been divided, so much so that we have built camps too far away from one another. And I think it has come to a point where even perhaps God is saying that you guys need to come back together to the center and focus on what is common and unite. Because only then would you be able to build and have the people prosper. If you're going to tear each other down constantly, that will be the result of your country.
Yeah.
Ruins. People demoralized. Surely you can't go on doing that. And so, perhaps, and we would discover it in the years to come, by divine intervention, God didn't give any government majority, so that you are forced to sit down together with people that you consider your enemies, right? And when you do that, and you're forced to build a country for people, what do? What do you have left? If not, to focus on commonalities and unite so that people that you lead at the bottom in the grassroots too would do the same, taking your leadership and rebuild this country once more.
Yeah.
The rallying cry cannot be one of divide. The rallying cry must be one of unity.
So it's unity in diversity, and that would be a powerful way. And I just hope that the voting in fear is not going to get this country anywhere, because it will make those fault lines. I put up a post actually in my TikTok when I was walking, and there were cracks on the pavement of a particular walk path, and everybody was just walking over it as if it's just so natural and it's there. But actually, that's what's happening, right? We have taken for granted all those fault lines are there as if it's nothing. But one day it's going to cause another eruption, and things might be even more severe. So, okay, so well said. So it's unity in diversity would be your next rallying cry, and you will not be fourth in that row, that dot. You'll be right in the front.
Amen.
first row, Now, the next question is this. What are your plans to make Subang Jaya a role model for improved race relations? I think you touched on that just now. And I think that, this whole concept of such a beautiful, do you believe in this multiracial concept that Malaysia is a multiracial country?
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. And I think this is why, I've served in the army, so I know on my left was the Chinese Malay and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, we recognize what the country has as its forehead. So that's important. What programs would you implement in schools to build this healthy relationship among the different races? We're talking about education today. I personally believe, from the educational point of view, having served for 40 years as a doctor, and that is to go back and build the history. You see, if you neglect the past history, it will repeat itself. That's why I talk about blind hope. It's blind leading the blind. Coming to the education, I believe that there must be a reminder of the past history of the struggles of this country, and be reminded that we are here to build and not to destroy. And the intentions, I think everybody has good intention for the country, but with the social media and all the words that are thrown around, the building process can crumble, because at the underneath is the fault lines have not been addressed. And that's why I'm saying that there must be a day, that's my thinking, a day of reconciliation where we are reminded. Okay, give me your thoughts on that. School-wise, education-wise, is this being addressed? Or is it something that is like people say, don't talk about it, it's the past?
Okay. I would say in school it is being taught through books. And I don't think that is good enough. But just touching upon that question exactly, about what Subang Jaya can do to build race relations, we have actually already started this since my first day here,
Right.
where for religious institutions, we get them to celebrate one another. So I have this road in Subang, and I want to try to push for it to be named maybe Jalan Harmony or Jalan Paduan, where we have a Gurdwara, and we have a Buddhist temple, and a Hindu temple, all on the same road, very short stretch, perhaps 200 meters. Okay. And they will make sure that they invite each other's committee when they have a big event, whether it is Vaisakhi or Wesak, or the event that the Hindus celebrate in
Thaipusam.
September. No, September.
September.
This temple celebrates Perumal,
Uh-huh.
which has a celebration in September. So they would do that. And for Raya and Ramadan, when we have the big events in the mosques, I will actually ask the Nazir whether I can do this on his behalf, to invite all places of worship in Subang to come and celebrate together. And we would do a press conference together with all the heads of the community. So we have already done that. Now, through schools, you would have that basic of teaching children about different people's religion, all right, about our origins, all right. So I think the book knowledge is there, Dr. Charles. But why is it that the book knowledge is not being converted into everyday life? And that is where I feel you can't stop at schools. You have to go into communities and have programs that celebrate one another, where you will get everyone to attend. Okay, and so how we do it here is we empower the resident association or the Rukun Tetangga or the joint management body. We give them funds specifically to conduct programs like this. And we see that being done across Subang. So I can tell you that, or whether it is Chinese New Year or your Deepavali or your Hari Raya or your Christmas, please come to Subang, join me on one weekend, and I will show you what it's like to celebrate together. My programs can be 10 a day, where I go across the entire community, and you would see from the stage where I stand that everyone, whether it's Chinese or Malay or Indian, are coming out to celebrate one another. And can you imagine this, Dr. Charles? I have the biggest mosque in Subang, and just behind it, we will be celebrating Christmas. On the stage, you would have Malay sing Christmas carols together with us. And of course, we respect the sensitivities. You know, you can stay away from the religious carols. But that is an example of what Malaysia can be like.
Cool.
And
I mean,
I want to use Subang to paint that for the country.
And I think with you at the headline and right in the front liner, keep the vision alive. It's just that with that, everything that you have said comes the word power. And that power can sometimes be a threat to certain people when the economic power in the country is in the hands of different kinds of people. Is always a threat to those who are underperforming. So anyway, there's so much more that I can talk to you, but we need to come to a time. I was going to bring you to meritocracy instead of all the kleptocracies and all the other crazy stuff that's going on. But I think meritocracy is something that's so important to keep a very educated population that is aware of what is the bigger pictures that are happening in the geopolitical arena, so that we are ready for the next tsunami that hits this country. We are educated enough to be together and not divided and fall. And this is something important. So on a closing note, give us your thoughts or vision of the future of Malaysia.
Malaysia can be an example of what a true melting pot is like, where we respect and celebrate one another. I just want to end with this. Just now I mentioned about Christmas. I also want to mention about Ramadan. And this would highlight the amount of work that we have to do. There is another mosque in my community, and we brought in the residents living around it, Chinese, to break fast for the first time in that mosque. All right. And for me, it is something that is so easy to know that when you go into a religious community, that you respect the dressing. All right. You dress as you should. So for the women, you wear your baju kurung and you have a sling down because you want to respect the people. When we brought this group of ladies who, of course, are not of the Muslim faith, it was their first time realizing that these are the cultural, religious requirements of this community and why it is done so. And that to me is a very unifying experience.
Absolutely.
And so I feel that, yes, that highlights how much we have to do, but at the same time, it provides hope because there are people that are willing to invest in it, and there are people who are willing to build that Malaysia for us.
Oh, wonderful. I mean, the Florence Nightingale of Subang Jaya, you have that candle of light, and you must think yourself that way because you're a beacon of hope. And I know that whatever you set out, whatever is spoken will not return to you void. And this is the calling cry at this time. And so we want to congratulate you again in your nomination. I know that many would hear this recording and hear your heart and vote with their hearts and not with fear. That, this is something that is timely to have you join me. And so I want to thank you once again for joining me on HEARTtalk, especially on this Quo Vadis series. And from all of us here, we want to wish you all the very best, that the next few weeks will be exciting, challenging, and most important of all, what is going to keep you as the winner is because you have the right spirit of unity that will cover up all other problems before you. So all the best to you, your family, your child. You got a lovely child. I saw that. Pictures of, it's a girl or a boy?
He's a boy.
There you go. So you're doing everything for him so that he'll have a better future ahead for him. And so we should all respect one another on that score. So from all of us here, well done and best wishes to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Charles. You take care.
My pleasure. So for those of you who have been following, I'm talking about this Quo Vadis Malaysia series. Where are you going, Malaysia? And today we have heard Michelle Ng, who knows exactly where she's going for her constituency called Subang Jaya. She knows the direction and she's on a road that's titled Unity in Diversity. And so it's a time to celebrate because her cause is the voice of the nation at need at this time. So once again, thank you from all of us here and we'll talk again. Hi everyone, this is Dr. Charles Lee. Before this episode starts, I have a small favor to ask from you. Many visit and watch the videos and they find it very informative. They get excited. Some of them write to me on my email, but they don't subscribe. So would you do me a small favor? Would you just press that subscribe button? It'll be so good for all of us. Certainly it helps the channel grow. It adds a little bit of vitality to the channel. At the same time, the numbers get bigger and my heart gets bigger too. So just to know that you're with me, you enjoy the company and I enjoy your company, you won't believe it. So please subscribe, press that button. I want to hear those bells jingle. And most of all, stay tuned and I love your company. We'll talk again.